Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com. Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 114 of the So Free Art podcast, which is a little podcast that I do about the art and things. In this one, we are going to be looking at an article, a little Art-Ickle, from issue number 12 of the Character Design Quarterly magazine, and it's an article called Behind the Cover Art with Sarah Conradsen, and it's all about designing the cover. So if you're watching on YouTube at youtube.com/SophieLawson, you can see the cover, but the cover is, this is issue number 12, and I did a quick look video of it, about a month ago on the YouTube. I'll put a link in the description and show notes and stuff, but I said that this was one of my favourite covers. So I think this is, if it's not my favourite, it's definitely one of my top 3. So, and the article is really fun, so we're going to go into that in a minute, and the article is going to be looking at stuff like mood boards, defining the narrative, sketching, foreshortening, colouring and lighting. So I've got lots of notes for this one, but what we're going to do is, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put the camera above the magazine, so you'll be able to see little images and stuff as we're going through it. But as I say many times, you don't need to really watch the video, because it'll be all talking. But little Dennis is with us, and he's got a little stick up his bum today, so he was sitting nice and comfortably on the desk. But little Dennis is going to start this one. He's really excited for this one, and so am I. So let's get into it. It's going to be looking at this little article from issue number 12 of Character Design Quarterly magazine. So let's get into this little article then. It's a beautiful cover. It really is a beautiful colour. Well, I was going to say colours as well. It's a beautiful cover, because it's got lots of really nice greens, bluey greens, oranges, but it's got like dark and light colours, or shades of the same colour. I love it. So it's a really beautiful cover. I would definitely recommend having a look at this cover if you're listening to the podcast. It's got little fishies on it as well. It's just a really nice cover. Cool characters. So this article is going behind the scenes of this cover. But before we do that, the artist is called Sarah Conradsen, and you can find her at sarahconradsen.com. I've actually got her little Instagram as well, and if you go on her Instagram, beautiful. She's creating really beautiful characters and colours. I think one of her main things is the use of colour. She's got a beautiful way of using colours. They're very like creamy, they're just beautiful colours really. Beautiful colours and characters. So I'll put a link to her Instagram as well in the show notes. But I've got so many notes for this one. I really enjoyed this. It was a very fun article to go through. So what I'm going to do, I'll quickly go through my little notes, talking about stuff. So the article is split into 7 main sections, which is the first bit. She talks about, the article is called Behind the Cover Art with Sarah Conradsen, and what they do is they talk about the artist first, so you get to meet the artist, little Sarah, and you see some of her other artwork. Again, beautiful artwork. I fell in love with her work as soon as I saw it. And then the article is split into another bit where they talks about designing the cover. What she does is she breaks down the entire process of bringing this cover to life, which I think is amazing. So it starts out, it's 7 little sections, which are mood board. So the first one is mood board, and for that, the main little sort of thing I got from it was, it's about exploring an idea visually. And then the next little bit is called defining the narrative. And the little bit I put for that is exploring idea mentally. So I like that. It's like before she even does any drawing, she's exploring the idea in her head visually by gathering images on this mood board, and then she starts exploring the idea mentally by asking questions like who, what, how and where. So she's starting to bring together the story in her head, but she's using as well the images from the mood board. And this is something I noticed from this article, was all of these little steps right to the very end, they're all interlinked. So even though the mood board starts at the start, it's still having an influence at the end, and I love that. It was like she. Well, what did I put here? I put something really cool here. I said, yeah, it feels like an organic process but structured. So that's almost like how it starts out. It starts out with organic, so the mood board is going to be very organic because she's gathering images, organically. But then when she starts defining the narrative, which is using her mind, that's very structured. So there was a nice balance here between like playing but also following rules, I suppose. Then it goes into a little rough sketching, and what I took away from that was the big bastard basic shapes. Then she goes into foreshortened pose, and I like this. She did this because during the rough sketching bit, she recognised that one of the little characters was going to be in a foreshortened pose. So I had this feeling that what was happening was, in her mind was saying, from past experience, she knew that this little girl in a foreshortened pose was going to be potentially trouble. So I feel like she did the foreshortened pose first, so that once she got into the proper sketching, she had already worked out the main potential issues, really. So I find that quite interesting, because I think if I was doing this, I think I would have gone straight to sketching, and then what would have happened is, because I wouldn't have worked out how to do the pose, all of my sketching would have been frustrating, because I would be trying to sketch, which is the fun bit, but I would also be trying to work out how to do the pose, whereas she just said, I'm going to focus on that pose until I can do it, and then I can start playing around with the sketching, which was the next phase, which was called refining the sketch. So this bit I put, for the notes, I put expression to create narrative. Oh yeah, this goes right back to the first bit about defining the narrative. So during the sketching bit, she's thinking about the narrative, which goes into something in one of the other articles I talked about, which is it all starts with writing. It's like once you've got the story in your head, I feel like the most important thing before you start drawing is the story. So what I liked about this was she started with the mood board, which was inspiring her to come up with story ideas. So I kind of like that. Instead of jumping straight to the writing, trying to come up with a story, she first brought all these little images together. So that made her coming up with the story idea a lot easier. So I think that's something I'm going to start doing, is the little mood board. I'm going to talk about each little section a bit more detailed in a minute, but during this little refining the sketch phase, she's asking, I love this. She was asking, does this need to be here? And does it need something else? So she was now starting to think, is what I'm drawing here, is it important? So she was taking stuff away if it wasn't adding to the story. But also, if it was missing something, she was putting it in. What I liked was she was playing, because she's sketching, but she's also thinking. So there's it's this balance between playing and being structured. The whole thing was like this. I loved it. The next little section was called colouring, and again it's about the relationships. It was like the relationships between warm and cool, the relationships between the colours of the characters and the background, and then the relationships between the colours through the whole colour palette. So I like that. I thought it was quite cool. There's a really cool little tip in there as well. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I love the little tip she's got. And then the last section was called lighting, and for this I've put details, which goes back to step 3. Starts out with the big bastard basic shapes when she's rough sketching, and then at the very end it all comes back to details, which is what all the other artists have been saying. All the articles and study things from like SVS Learn courses, they all say start with the big bastard basic shapes, and once you've got your basic shapes, start adding your details. So it felt like the lighting phase was where the details started coming in. It's where it really come to life. So I think this is why I have a habit of jumping to the details, because the details is, for me, it's the fun bit. But the problem is, if you haven't worked out the foundation of the big shapes, there's no point having details. So that's one of the things I struggle with at the minute, is stopping myself going to the details. And then in the lighting, I also put about light sources. So she was thinking about the light source, which is something I've started doing with my draw days. It's the first thing I ask is, where is the light source? Because then you have a consistent light. But what I found interesting was, because there's a lot of water in this image, she actually had 2 light sources, and she talks about the different colours she uses for each light source. So it's quite interesting, this. But overall, the main takeaways that I've put here is lots of time spent playing and planning before proper drawing. Again, it feels like this week's inspirational quote actually goes to her, and it's about not being afraid. And I think the reason she's not afraid is because she spends so much time at the start playing, when it doesn't matter if she makes mistakes and stuff. So by the time she gets to the bit when she's actually doing the detail, because she's played so much, she knows what she's doing. So it makes the detail phase a lot easier. I thought it was really cool. So to me, it made me feel like the importance of playing and planning before you even start drawing, which I think is quite cool. I've put here how everything relates to everything, which is I put more of that in the big notes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it was cool how, everything was just, it felt like one big organic process, like I said, and yet somehow it was separated. So it's really cool. It's like each little, like the mood board is a separate entity, but yet it also links in with everything else. It was really cool. I then put, it starts with writing, because again I just had this feeling that it starts with writing. I think if I keep telling myself it starts with writing, it's going to mean that I will get into the habit of starting with writing. Then I've put a big word, exploring, and I've put writing equals mentally and analytical, and then the mood board equals visually and intuitive. So the first phase was exploring, which it just looks like a really fun phase, that, because I've never done a mood board before, but I feel like this is something I'm gonna add into my little process now. It seems really fun. I then put story affects everything. I came away with the idea that the story, it affects the colours, the lines, the shapes, the props, the settings, the expressions, the characters, the lighting. Pretty much everything is influenced by the story, which is why I think it's so important, that first phase where you're coming up with the story, because everything else is related to it. And then at the very end I've put, don't be afraid. I underlined that. So I love it when the message is to be fearless. I think that's one of the main things with art, and that goes into this week's inspirational quote as well, which actually comes from Sarah Conradsen. And then I've put at the end, I love her art. I just love her art. It's got a very nice it's got a nice feeling about it. It's like you want to jump into the scene and become part of it. And then I've also put, seems like a fun process, which I think is really cool. I feel like it's very important to have fun. I think fun is the main thing here. Again, that goes into the inspirational quote as well. It's all about fun and fearlessness. So let's get into this little article, each little section. So the first bit is the mood board, and what she does is what I loved was she started out with in her head she had already had this idea of a tiger. So what she did was she went off and got images of tigers, and she stuck them on this board. But I've heard other people on podcasts and stuff, I think they use Pinterest as like a mood board. So what you do is you gather loads of images, colours, stuff like that. Basically inspirational stuff that is all going to go together into the image. So what she's done on hers is she's got a little piece with loads of different colours. So she in the mood board she's thinking about the colours. She's already thinking about the colours, which I think's cool. She's getting images and references of tigers in different poses. She's then got a little character. So she's got an image in her head of this little character, and she's getting reference of like Oriental people wearing these hats. So she's getting reference of the little hats and stuff like that. She's then got reference of like plants. So even little things like the foliage, she's got little references of. It's like she's gathering images to create like a scene. And she's got little images of fishes and stuff, which I think's cool. The way she's done this in the article is so fun, because what she's done is she's actually drawn her mood board. So she's like sketched her little mood board. It's cool, it is. But in here she said, when in search of an idea, I like to create mood boards where I collate anything I find interesting. So in my little notes, what I said was, I've never tried this before, but I've heard people use Pinterest. I've put, she's already thinking about the story behind the artwork, which I think's really cool. So even though she's just randomly getting different images, they are all linked together. Again, it's this thing of everything being separate but all being together, which is cool. Started out she wanted a tiger. Yeah, so that tiger basically influenced the characters, the story, the setting and the colours, which I think is cool. So was there anything else in there that I thought was... Oh, there was actually. She said about how when she's searching for ideas, she likes to listen to music, and the music, it inspired her to create a little hunter. It was a little huntress, a little girl, which I think she's a cool character. And the music she was listening to, it created this visual in her head of a fierce, determined little girl, which complements the little tiger, because she's got this tiger who is like fun. Yeah, the tiger is very sort of playful. The girl is very serious. So you've got two little characters who you can tell they're going to be really interesting characters to work with, I think. Like, you start imagining their story and the things they get up to. It's really fun. So then she moves into defining the narrative, which I think's cool, because what she's done is she's doing this is the writing phase, where she says all illustrations need some form of narrative. She said this concept helps to define the characters, who they are, what they'll look like, which character traits they have, and what they're doing in the scene. So I love this. She's basically asking who. So she asks who for each of the characters. So she's got the little girl, and then she thinks of words like determined. With the tiger, she's thinking of colours, picky eater. So there's a little bit of humour in here. But she's doing that thing that they said in the other article. I think it was about a month ago, I did a article, and they said in there, when you're starting out with a story idea, pick these adjectives, so words that describe the characters and stuff, like determined. And then what she's done is she's picked little simple words like hunting, colours, lake, forest, leaves, sphere. They got like a spear. And then she's thinking about the fish, and she's put a koi fish, which are my favourite fishies. They're like those oriental fishies. They're white and orange. I love those fish. They've got such a nice shape about them. So what I liked was, this is what makes it feel like an organic process. Is she's asking who, she's then coming up with an idea, and then because she's thought of the lake, so she's thought, where is it? It's in a lake, which then makes her think, well, there's going to be fish in the water. She's put a question mark, so she starts thinking about the fish, then she's starting to think about the forest, and then all of this is influencing the colours, which I think is really cool. So I feel like the mood board and this narrative phase, I reckon it actually goes together. So I reckon she's probably gone to the mood board, picking these images, which is inspiring her. She's then going into what it is little, what they're called, I think they're called spider bubble charts or something, where you write like who, and then you have little, I think they're spider charts. You have little lines coming off of who, and it says like girl, and then a little line coming off girl, it says determined and stuff like that. But I feel like what she's probably done is she's come up with who, little girls in the village and stuff, and then I reckon she's gone back to the mood board to get colours. So again, both of these things, I feel like it's all going together, even though it's separate. And then she talks about how she put the girl on the back of the tiger, which this now creates like a connection between the two characters, which I think is really cool. So even though they are completely different types of characters, you can feel the love between them. And you can feel that they trust each other. Yeah, and you know that they're going to look after each other as well. They're going to be friends for life, I think. Which is cool. That was basically that bit. I feel like this is the bit that I feel like really fun, because you're just playing. I feel like you can't go wrong in that phase. But again, I think even later on down the line, when you're going to start doing your sketching, I imagine you're still going to come back to the mood board, because you might sketch something and you might think, it might be that you think, I want her to be holding a weapon. So then you go back to the mood board, or you'd go back to the writing and say, what sort of weapon is it? And then you go to the mood board to get your little inspirational reference images, and then you go back to your sketching. So it's like you're constantly going to be going back and forth between everything. But then she moves into the rough sketching. So for this one, what did I put on this one? Yeah, she starts out finding the big bastard basic shapes and a composition, which I thought was really cool. So this is like the thumbnailing. You get your little thumbnails and you make sure that the composition is nice. So you start with your big bastards and a composition, which means if you zoom out, it's going to look nice. So then when you zoom in to do your details, it already looks nice, because it looks nice as a big thing when you're zoomed out, which I think it's very interesting. That starts with the big and then she moves into the details. Oh yeah, she goes with the most dynamic rough sketch. So even though it was probably the hardest one, because it had this foreshortened character, it was the most, she knew it was the most dynamic, and she was also thinking about the story, which I thought was amazing. Even in the sketching phase, she's going back and forth with the story. Is this camera angle, and is this composition telling the story? Which I think is I love it. I really do love it. So I like that as well. That's kind of fearless. Even though she knows that this pose is it's going to be the most challenging because of the foreshortened character, she still did it because she knew it would be the most impactful for the story. So I feel like that's quite confident. When you read something like that, it's quite, for me, it was quite confident. And then, because she then goes into the foreshortened pose, I like that, because what she didn't do was she didn't jump straight to doing the final sketches, because maybe she had bitten off more than she could chew, and maybe she wasn't actually skillful enough to do this foreshortened pose yet. So at least during the next phase, which is the foreshortened pose, she'd be able to realise, okay, I can't actually do this, so she could go back and do a different sketch, instead of finding out later on when she's done a lot more work. So again, this is like a way to be fearless without, but minimising the risk, I suppose, which is quite cool. But in the rough sketching, she also says, only create a few. Oh yeah, she said a lot of them felt static. So again, that was going back to like the gestury thing. I want a drink. Anyone want a hot chocolate? Hot chocolate is the best. She then goes into the foreshortened pose, which is number 4. What I put here was, once you pick the composition and the rough sketch, it starts building on the basic shapes. Starts with the girl character, as this girl is foreshortened, and she put here, it's very loose to capture the energy, which I think that goes back into the gesture thing, thinking about the gesture. But what I like about this one is the character, it's holding a spear, which is a straight line, and everything else is kind of curvy. So that straight line is quite nice, with the curviness of everything else, which is quite cool. But she's done a very good job of that foreshortenedness. It is a very cool camera angle. It's like you're above the lake, looking down at the water, with a little girl sat on the back of a tiger, and the girl's looking up at the camera, and the tiger's looking into the water. But it's a very cool camera angle, because it tells the story, which the story is about her going fishing for these little fishies. So, but she's going fishing with these fishies with her little friend, the tiger. But the tiger's not that interested. So you get like the message of the story in the scene because of the camera angle. So again, I felt like the importance of the camera angle. But the problem I'm going to have is, I know I probably, maybe, that a pose like this would be very challenging for me, I think. So with my draw day challenges, my drawings, a lot of them are very static poses, like looking front on sort of thing, because I'm a bit too afraid to try the perspectives. It's a bit of a shame that. Got to start being more fearless, I think. So then she moves into refining the sketch, and I put here, what's I put here? Refining the sketch. Yeah, she talks about the shape language. That's the big bastards. Once you got the big bastard basic shapes, the shape language is nice. Yeah, looks visually correct. So she's comparing what she's got on the paper to what was in her head, which I think's cool. And then the first thing she does when she's refining the sketches is actually works on the expressions of the characters. Again, she knows how important the story is, and the importance of story is expressions and feelings. So you get that by the faces. So again, she's, instead of faffing about with things in the background, she's focusing on what is important, making sure she gets that right before doing everything else, which I think is really, again, it's information I think is important for me to remember, really, I suppose. She says, she focuses on the character's feelings, and then she refines the line work. She starts asking, does this need to be here? Which I love. That goes into something else. One of these, I was going through a book, a figure drawing book, with the gesture, the artist said, when you're doing gesture drawing, you only want to place lines that need to be there. So what you want to do is, before you even put a line on the paper, ask yourself, does that line need to be there? Because the importance of gesture is to capture the essence. So the essence, you want less. Less is more. So I thought that was really interesting. She's asking, does it need to be there? So she's actually removing stuff. For instance, you can see here in the images, she's deleted one of the fishies. So there were 2 fishes caught on her spear. She's actually removed one of them. So she obviously decided it was more impactful to have just one. Which I think I would agree with that. Little things like that are really important. Again, it all starts telling the story. And that's what she's asking. She says, does it need to be here for the story? But what I found really interesting, she's also asking, does something else need to be here? So for instance, I can't see anything. Oh yeah, no. Yeah, she didn't explain anything that she did add. I can't really see anything from... But for instance, in the final image, there's lots of little fishies in the water. So she might have had a phase where there were no fishies and she started saying, something's missing here. And she might have thought, I know what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some little fishies into the water. Which again, it creates more of a scene. It brings the scene to life. So she's not just asking, does it need to be here, and removing stuff. She's also asking, does something else need to be here, and adding stuff. Which I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before. I've heard about removing things to keep it simple. It's the first time I've really heard somebody say about adding stuff, which I thought was quite cool. But what I love about this article is, this cover is so beautiful, and the article includes basically the final sketch. So you get to see this beautiful cover as like an image, just as like a little sketch, which I think is amazing, because I've always found sketches to be way more, well, I would say they're normally more alive. They've got more energy about them normally than the final one. Here, I would say she's actually somehow managed to capture lots of energy in the final image. But what I also like is in the sketch, because it's all lines, it's much easier to see things. So for instance, in the sketch you can see the little lines like the ripples of the water. So it's quite interesting, you can sort of see the flow of the water, how it's flowing with the characters. So again, I'm pretty sure that is not going to be a coincidence. She's definitely thought about that. She's thought about everything, because even the water is flowing with the characters, which is flowing towards the bottom of the page, which is where the focus is of the characters' faces. So it's almost like everything is flowing towards that. And in the lighting bit at the end, she also talks about that. The light source she picked it so that the light would flow with the characters. So again, she's really thinking about everything here, which I think is amazing. The next phase is the colouring phase. Now, what I would say is the colours of this are just unbelievable. I don't think I'd ever be able to explain the colours. They're like, to say it's orange and green, it doesn't do it justice. It's a very beautiful colour combination. So in what she says here, she says she enjoys a lot of contrast. So she spends a lot of time perfecting the colour palette that will create the tone I'm looking for. So again, before she starts getting into the colouring, she's spending lots of time just thinking about all the colours and how they relate to each other. Again, I love it. She's spending lots of time thinking and then lots of time playing, which is really cool, because I imagine she might have a phase where she thinks to herself, I'm getting fed up of thinking, so she can go and start playing. but then she might want to start thinking a bit more. Which I like that, because there are times when you don't want to be thinking, you want to just get in there and play. But there's a time and a place, I suppose, which is what I'm thinking about this. But she says she wanted the muted blue-green colour of the water to contrast with the vivid, warm, orange autumn leaves and the white tiger. I love it. Now, the little quote, the little tip, which I think it's amazing. Again, this shows you the level of thinking that's going on here. The tiger is white and black. Well, it's not. See, it's got black stripes, but it hasn't. It's actually got a very dark purple. Amazing. Little things like that. She didn't just use black. She says here, instead of choosing stark black stripes for the tiger, I chose a very dark purple to soften the tiger's appearance and make the design more pleasing to the eye. So again, she's thinking about the overall image to make it nice and friendly, I suppose. But again, that tiger, she already decided at the start that the tiger was going to be a bit of a playful character, which is a juxtaposition with the girl who's very serious. So the way she can help create a more playful, friendly tiger is by the use of her colours. It's amazing. This is what I'm saying. The shapes, the lines, the colours, everything has the potential to tell the story. So all these little things can help tell the story, but at the same time, the story is going to influence the shapes and stuff you're picking. So it's almost like, what comes first? Is it the story that's creating these colours, or is it the colours that's telling the story? I think it's both. And this is the main thing with this article. There's this constant balance going on between sort of opposites, which is not just a sort of a thing going on behind the scenes in her head. It's also a visual thing, because very visually you've got two different types of characters playing off each other, and it's all balanced beautifully. So I feel like it's to me, this is probably, it's like a perfect image. I can't see anything wrong with this image. It's absolutely amazing. And as soon as I saw it, when I first saw it on that video about a month ago, when I did a little click look video, I just knew there was something special about this one. It's beautiful. So the last little section of this article is called Light and Shadow. What did I put for this one? What did I put on here? I said about how I like this. She says, light and shadow gives illustration and characters life. This is where everything starts to pop. So again, it goes back to that thing. It starts out with the big bastards, which is very simple, and there's no life to it, but there is an energy about it. But at the end, you start bringing life. But you've still got the energy that you've created from the big bastard basic shapes. It's this beautiful thing going on here between the big things and the details. It was all coming together. It's really cool. What else did I put here? Yeah, thinking about the colour palette. She put about how the main source follows the direction of the characters, so it flows. Yeah, and then everything is flowing together. So it's like unity, bringing it all together. Even the little fishies are swimming in the same direction as the characters, which I think is cool. It is really cool. What else did we put here? Oh, yeah, this is cool as well. So because there's lots of water, she's got two light sources, and she's put here the warm yellowish for the main, and then a cool blue for the bounce light. But she talks about, I choose a warm yellowish light as my main and a cool blue as the bounce. Because she picked those colours because they complement the main colour palette. So even the colours of the light she's thinking about, even the colours of the light, she's thinking, how do they relate with the colour palette? It's like amazing. Yeah, it's really cool. This gets me thinking, because like in the future, when I start adding lighting and stuff, I'm going to be thinking about things like this. Whereas before, I would have just picked any old lighting. So it's again, these little things that you're picking up is really cool. And then the last bit, she adds the white highlights to create like a sparkling effect on the water. And that's when it really pops, because that brings some sort of magicalness to the water and to the scene. Yeah, beautiful. The lighting's really cool though. Like on her hat, she's got this like a triangular, one of those, like, what are they called? It's like a cone. She's wearing like a cone hat. The lighting of that cone hat is really cool. Yeah, but overall, this has just been it's not only is it a beautiful image, the process that she's using, I find it really fascinating. Because it, like I said at the very start, it feels like a very playful but structured process. And I feel like that mood board is quite important, because before reading this, what I thought was the best way would be to do the writing, come up with like an idea in your head, do the writing, and then start looking for reference. But she's actually doing the reference is going to be influencing the story, but at the same time the story goes back, so it's like two things at once. And again, that goes into the sort of, if you're thinking of, you might sit down to do your writing and you can't come up with ideas, so that's when you go off and start looking for little inspiration things which will generate ideas, but at the same time you might already have an idea, so it's like you can play around with this. It's cool. That's basically it really. I thought it was such an amazing little article, and like I said, not only is it a beautiful image, beautiful process, and when you go onto her Instagram and stuff, you can see she's got beautiful artwork. So I hope you enjoyed it. It's a beautiful little article which was called Behind the Cover Art with Sarah Conradsen from issue number 12 of the Character Design Quarterly magazine. Ding! So little Dennis has finished it. I think he's had enough. No, he hasn't. He wants to keep going, but we've got to make these little podcasts a bit shorter. So this week's little inspirational quote actually comes from this article. I really think this is one of my favourite little articles, because the reason is I love that cover. I think it's such an amazing cover, and the fact that you're going through the process of how she put the cover together, it's really cool. I think there's lots of little like bits of wisdom in here, but I just find it fascinating seeing how artists create their little images and stuff, because it's all about their mind really, what's going on in their mind as they're bringing this thing to life. But you can find show notes and everything at sophielawson.com. Little Dennis clicked that one. And you can also find the video at youtube.com/sophielawson. But all that's left is this week's little inspirational quote, and it goes to Sarah Conradsen, and it is, I love this, it's another little simple one. It says, have fun with the colours and don't be afraid to use a lot of contrast. What I like about that is fun and fearlessness, which I think is what art and being creative is all about. It is all about fun, because you're expressing yourself, so it's fun, but it's also about being fearless, because I think part of expressing yourself is it's like being confident, I suppose, in what you're doing. Yeah, so I just think that's a really, really cool little quote, and it sums up this little cover as well, because you can see fun in the cover. There is a lot of fun in the cover, especially with that little tiger. But as well, like she says in the article, there's lots of contrast. So she is very fearless, very confident as well. So very confident. So this week's little inspirational quote: have fun with the colours and don't be afraid to use lots of contrast